Is the worst over, or should we brace for more selling? Let's ask our market pros, Scott Martin and Bob Iaccino at the CME. Scott, let me start with you. You come on my show on the Fox Business Network often. I want to let the audience know that you've been spot on. You kind of saw this coming. You went into gold. But now everything is kind of getting hit pretty good. Was this that climactic selling that Wall Street always wants to see?
Yeah, it was, and there was also climactic selling last Friday. There was climactic selling last Monday and the Friday before that. And Charles, I appreciate the kudos, but the reality is I called some of it and not all of it, and that's the tough thing. But that's okay, because as investors, there's a couple things you got to keep perspective on: where your risk profile is, what your time horizon is, and what assets you own. Because there are assets, admittedly, Charles, that I still have in tech land, for example, that are getting absolutely hammered. But as you mentioned, there's things like bonds that we own are doing fine. Gold, which we still love, near and dear to my heart, is doing fine. So the reality is, as investors, and knowing that we are diversified, things feel the absolute worst when we're in the belly of the beast. It feels like it's never going to end. You know, Susan was giving those interviews on the street. It was surprising to see some optimism. I guess that's kind of heartwarming. But more of that will build up over time as volatility settles down, and the market will go up again. I can promise you that.
You know, Bob, the thing is, and referring back to Susan's interviews at the Man on the Street interviews, most of those folks are pretty optimistic. They think it will go by. Of course, after 11 years of buying dips and making big money, people are being conditioned that way. But Wall Street likes to see the individual investor, completely throw in the towel. Does that have to happen before this market turns around?
Well, I would say it does, Charles, if we weren't in such a strong economy to begin with. You just look back to the jobs numbers that we had on Friday, and you go back to the Michigan Sentiment Consumer Confidence numbers that came in better than expected. That actually had the beginnings of coronavirus in it. We're going to get another one this week. So if the consumer confidence stays up, I think the optimism about buying this dip will be up as well. I think we're very near the bottom here, and my reasoning behind that is this is not going to be completely untouched and left alone by the Trump administration. These targeted stimulus packages are going to happen, especially because we're in an election year. Whether it's lasting stimulus or not isn't really important to me, because once you get that footing back under the global economy in general, we don't even see the demand potential falling off yet. We just know it's going to happen.
Right.
So this is a repricing that's necessary, but I believe it's overdone, and I remain in that stance.
That sentiment report you referred to, the last 2 days of the report, 20% of the respondents mentioned the coronavirus, although their sentiment level was at 90 on average, which is still pretty high. I want to bring in Art Hogan with us. Art, a lot of moving parts here this week. We're anticipating maybe the ECB will make a big move, maybe the Bank of England, maybe the UK budget, the federal government here. To Bob's point, the administration is saying whatever they do will be targeted, timely, and temporary. Is that what the market wants to hear, or do they need something more committal?
No, I think that's right. I think what the fiscal policy response is going to do is going to be much more of a psychological benefit than it is a functional benefit. And I think that's important, right? So one of the things that the government wants to do is, hey, listen, we're going to get the test in your hands if you need it. And if you don't have insurance, you won't have to pay for it. And if you need to stay home, we're going to find a way to expand your unemployment insurance. All those things are temporary, but they provide a great deal of comfort so that when people come in contact with this, they don't go in the workplace. I think the second thing, and I think that as important as anything, when we talk about what levels we've gotten to on equity valuations, there's about 3,000 companies that trade publicly on the New York Stock Exchange. Half of them made a 52-week low today. So if you've got a 52-week low and that's happened twice in recent history, in 87 and 2008. So we are at a very washed out stage. I think a fiscal policy response is going to be very helpful, if not functionally, certainly psychologically.
So could possibly, Scott, the best case scenario right now be that we trade in these violent swings? Perhaps there'll be sessions where the Dow's up over 1,000 points, 1,500 points, but we're range bound until we get more data on the economic outcome of this and, of course, the medical outcome.
Yeah, and that's a hard, I guess, premise to really undertake, doesn't it, Charles? Because it gets pretty tiring after days like this over and over again. I mean, I understand the plight of the investor on this one and why you got to buy stuff like gold here, I think. But I do caution, though, a little bit, and Art makes a great point. I agree there needs to be fiscal stimulus and work from Congress. But my goodness, guys, this is a government that has abandoned the people. I mean, look at, some of the left media and some of the left-leaning folks in Congress who I feel just want to tear down this economy economy and tear apart people's 401ks at the expense of that to win in November. And so we're counting a lot on the government to get their you-know-what together to help us. And I think that's, too, why the market's worried, because they don't believe that the government can collaborate together to actually help us out.
I just read moments ago where Governor Newsom had kind words for President Trump and Vice President Pence. So I got to tell you, it is important. This is the moment when all elected officials do the right thing. Gentlemen, thank you all very much.